racing from rally to rally, hoping to defy history.
Democrats support a socialist takeover of health care that would totally obliterate Medicare.
The numbers look great for the Democrats if their most loyal voters show up.
You won't vote.
You young people never do.
But I do.
I do.
Plus, a journalist disappears, and the evidence points to a shocking Saudi government plot.
I've never been more disturbed than I am right now. If it did happen, it would be hell to pay.
Inside Politics. The biggest stories sourced by the best reporters now.
Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm John King. To our viewers in the United States and around the world, thank you for sharing your Sunday. The midterm election now just 3 weeks away. Democrats have a clear path to seize control of the House, while Republican odds of keeping the Senate look brighter. One wild card, Democratic optimism in big races for governor.
We are making choices and decisions about everyone's lives. And if you're not part of the decision making, I promise you, you're still going to be affected. The really crass way I've heard it put is, look, if you're either at the table or you are on the menu. I'm
Produce yet another election surprise.
The Democrats have become totally consumed by their chilling lust for power. You can either vote for Democrat mob rule or you can vote for a Republican Party that stands proudly for law and order, fairness, freedom, and justice.
There's also this wild card, a pre-election foreign policy confrontation with the Congress. The president is reluctant to get tough on Saudi Arabia, but this bipartisan outrage after the disappearance of a Saudi journalist.
If they lured this man into that consulate and they killed him and they chopped up his body and now they're lying about it, that is going to have a dramatically negative impact on U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia on Capitol Hill. Members of Congress are going to be up in arms about that, including myself, and something's going to happen. You cannot do those things.
We begin the hour with the midterm landscape 23 days out. Let's take a look at the numbers, and they favor Democrats. This is our CNN poll, a 13-point lead among likely voters when voters are asked which party will you vote for in your local election for Congress. A big lead for the Democrats here. New ABC Washington Post data today backs this up. It's about the same. A path to take back the House for the Democrats. The Senate's more dicey. We'll get to that in a minute. All of it's driven by this. The president actually up from his poll numbers of recent months, but still historically low when it comes to a president in his first midterm election. This is what drives midterm elections. The president's approval rating at 43% in our poll, 41% in the new ABC numbers. This driving Democrats as we go to the polls. Let's take a look right here. This is why we have Democrats currently favored. 206 seats, lean, likely, and solid for the Democrats. Look at the solid Democrats, 182. Only 153 seats, solid Republican. Right now, advantage Democrats. You see the advantage in the leans, likelies, and solid, plus plenty of opportunities in the yellow toss-ups for Democrats in the final 3 weeks, unless there's a big change to take back the House. A different story when you look at the Senate. We currently have the Republicans at 49, Democrats at 45. Democrats, if nothing else changed on this map, would have to run the toss-up states. Difficult. Republican Tennessee, Republican Arizona, Republican Nevada. Democrats would have to run the board here or somehow hold their seat in North Dakota, which we list right now as lean Republican. Somehow take Texas, which we list as lean Republican. A much more difficult climate here. Still, the opportunity within reach in the Senate, the House clearly within reach. This is why the president is on the road constantly, and so are prominent Democrats, like the former Vice President Joe Biden.
You know what I know. This is not hyperbole. This election is bigger than politics. No matter how young or how old you are, you've never been through an election quite like this. Never. Our basic values, our basic American values are under assault. This is America. So get up. Take it back. It's time.
With us this Sunday to share their reporting and their insights, CNN's Abby Phillip, Michael Scher of the New York Times, Michael Warren of the Weekly Standard, and Politico's Rachel Bade. The former vice president on the road there, that's in Kentucky. Get up, vote. The urgency there, the Democrats see the opportunity. They're essentially hoping they don't blow it, right?
You know, if you think back to the day after the inaugural, the Women's March in Washington, which captured more than women, it was sort of a cross section of liberals. Since that moment, there hasn't been an opportunity for the left in this country, for Democrats in this country, to really lay down a marker that responds to this president and what this president has been doing, both the policies and the behavior. And I think that's what Mr. Biden, Vice President Biden, was trying to capture, and I think that's what is fueling the numbers that you talked about. The advantage for Democrats is because this really is the moment that Democrats want to walk into those voting booths and say, we don't like this.
But we don't like this. And to your point about the Women's March, and to the Vice President's point about essentially get out. You better get out. You don't want to wake up the morning after the election and have wasted this opportunity. Just look at some of the numbers. We mentioned the big numbers, the generic ballot. Who are you going to vote for Congress? Democrats have a growing lead as we get closer to the election. This is why. First, you look at men voters. The president's approval rating among men, 52%, disapproval, 45%. On the generic ballot, men break 50% Republican, Democrat 45%. Get it? They follow the president's approval. But look at women now. Trump approval 34%, disapproval 63%. Generic ballot, look how women are saying they're going to vote. Republican 33%, Democrat 63%. A direct, how you think about the president, how you feel about the president, is how you're going to vote in 3 weeks.
Yeah, Republican leadership has known for a long time that they have a problem with female voters, and they know that they need to convince at least some of them to stick with the party in order to keep their majorities. I think that right now there's obviously a little bit of hope on the Republicans' part because the president's approval numbers have increased because of the Kavanaugh bump. The top 70 most contested House races, Republicans have reserved $60 million on TV, while Democrats have $109 million worth of TV ads that are going to be coming up or have been running until Election Day. And that is not including Bloomberg coming in and bringing another $80 million. Democrats, the advantage and the enthusiasm is really showing in this money right now.
And here's another way to look at it. You mentioned those targeted races. And again, Democrats with an advantage. That's the party with momentum, the party with enthusiasm. But Republicans, a lot of Republicans have been around for a long time and say, whoa, this doesn't happen to us. What's going on here? Look at this other way to look at it. In House races, Democrats, as of October 12th, outraising this is just candidates outraising their opponents. 626 to 473 million in House races. You look at the Senate races as well there. If you have momentum, if you have the numbers on your side, sometimes the missing ingredient is the money. Democrats are not lacking there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they're making up for what they know is going to be a factor. And I think we're already starting to see it in the polls, is that the president is having a pretty good week. He's having a pretty good couple of weeks. The economy is still doing quite well. He has a few things on his plate that he can notch as a win. And I think as we get closer to November, they're going to start to see some narrowing, which is when the money is going to matter the most. So I think Democrats are going into a fall cycle. Actually, despite the feelings of angst about President Trump, there is also the reality that the president is having a pretty kind of stable last couple of weeks, especially compared to the summer when his poll numbers were really dropping hard. So that's stabilizing. Democrats are trying to work on turnout, but also using their money advantage to try to make the difference, because they're going to need it. In the next couple of weeks, these polls are going to narrow.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, forgive me, it's fascinating when you talk to pollsters about this, because they talk about the Kavanaugh confirmation battle, and they say it energized everybody, but Republicans need it to be energized. Right. And so the Democrats were already energized. Republicans come up. The Republican pollster Neil Newhouse, very smart at this, called it, he thinks we're going to get a split decision, a split election, where the House races are trending more toward the Democrats, but those red state Senate races, the North Dakotas of the world, the Indianas of the world, Tennesseans of the world, they're moving back toward the Republicans, they bet.
Yeah, and that was always kind of the way it was, right? The Senate map was always so much more favorable to Republicans. The House map much more favorable to Democrats, because there were all of these districts that voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, but have a Republican House member. So Democrats obviously thought that's where we can start building our majority. You know, listening to Vice President Biden, though, I'm sort of struck by a little bit of a disparity, and something that if I were a Democrat, I'd be a little worried about, which is they're still talking about trying to fire up sort of the base of the Democratic Party. Donald Trump should have fired these people up from day one, which they have supposedly from the Women's March. But you look at the Democratic achievements in special elections over the past couple of years, and they've not necessarily been from resistance-style Democrats. I think of Connor Lamb from Pennsylvania outside a suburban Pittsburgh district. I think there's a disparity there between the voters that Democrats feel like they still need to get out to sort of build that majority, the resistance-type voters, and those folks who actually exist, who are on the fence, who may vote for Republicans or Democrats from time to time. That there's sort of a mixed message there. You can't just simply run on against Trump. Right. And I think that's where Democrats have sort of struggled to find a message that's not simply anti-Trump.
More often than not, though, you're right. They're hoping that the anti-Trump animus, where they need it, is baked in. And you need to motivate people. Why vote for us? Democrats, the #1 issue, if you look at their ads in the closing weeks, health care, taxes, jobs, unemployment, anti-Trump corruption. So the anti-Trump is low on the list. Health care is up top. The Democrats campaigning saying they didn't replace Obamacare. They've taken certain pieces of away, and the Democrats saying they'll take more.
This is Mike Braun. He backs Washington's latest health care plan, allowing insurers to deny coverage to people with pre-existing conditions.
Jackie Walorski voted 11 times to undermine health care and take away coverage from people with pre-existing conditions.
I cannot believe that Martha McSally would vote to let insurance companies deny health coverage to people like my son because he has a pre-existing condition.
It's striking to me. The Democrats think this works. They have data to back that up. But when Obama was president in 2 midterm elections where the Democrats got spanked, 2010 and 2014, they ran from Obamacare. Now they're hugging it.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. You know, we sort of assume the Democrats, the whole mantra with them is anti-Trump, anti-Trump. But if you actually look at a lot of these ads, like you just played there, they're focused on these sort of bread and butter pocketbook issues, health care, taxes, economy, because Democrats think that that is what gins people up the most, and that Trump is going to do all the advertising they need for them, and that he's going to be out there saying controversial things, and they don't need to highlight what he's saying. You have to wonder if that's sort of a mistake on their part, but because, like you said, the Republicans were able to throw this in Obama's face a few cycles ago. But yeah, that's sort of, they're focused on those bread and butter issues.
23 days to put it to the test. The Democrats think health care. When we come back, the GOP's campaign closed. The president is everywhere, as are warnings of open borders and socialism. And this Sunday's politicians say the darndest things. Odes to a president who, we all know, loves flattery.
It is such an honor to work with this man. Is he not the best president we have ever had?
The strongest personality, the strongest president we have seen in our lifetime.
You're overseeing the greatest economy in American history right now.
I decided the more Steve Chabot you get, the less President Trump you're going to get. So I'm not going to give this speech. God bless you all, and God bless President Trump.
Welcome back. 4 rallies, 2 call-ins to Fox News, a sit-down with 60 Minutes, a couple of magazine interviews, and an episode of profane reality TV direct from the Oval Office.
Trump is on his hero's journey right now, and he might not have expected to have a crazy like Kanye West run up and support, but best believe we are going to make America great.
The president, in the closing days of an election that is all about him, is going all in, being him. Listen to this very Trumpian praise last night of the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell.
Tough cookie. I know tough people. He's tough. He's Kentucky tough. You know, he goes down as the greatest leader, in my opinion, in history. What we've done is incredible together. But he's better when I'm president than he ever was when anyone else was president. Doing much better.
This is a giant bet by the president. There are a lot of Republican strategists who would prefer go to the big red states, go to Montana, go to North Dakota, go to Indiana, don't go anywhere else. The president has decided, you're going to make it about me? Let's make it about me. The question is, can it work?
It seems almost like Republicans are sort of coming around to this strategy, that they're nervous about it because I think a lot of people wonder if lightning can strike twice in reality. But President Trump's instincts have gotten them through some pretty tough spots. I think it helped them with the Kavanaugh hearing, and now the president is cooperating with them on the message. He's executing a message against Democrats, the mob, about health care in that op-ed that he wrote last week about the issue. And now he's trying to get his people out, trying to get them to make it about him, because I think Republicans have realized that it has not been enough, that the achievements that they've been able to make in Congress, and it's not mobilizing their voters. It needs to be about something else. And actually what the president does is he speaks to his voters about something different, about culture, about what they how they belong together as supporters of Trump. And I think he's kind of the only person who knows how to do that, and that's kind of why they need him out there in a broader field. Maybe not everywhere still. There's still a lot of places he can't go, but he's being a lot more bold than I think maybe some of the more conservative in the sort of risk-taking sense Republicans might have wanted.
And again, to that point, there are some places he cannot go. There are some places where he is toxic, and candidates who run perfect races will lose on the Republican side just because the president is toxic. But again, if you look back at history, Democrats ran from President Obama in 2010, ran from President Obama in 2014. It doesn't work. It creates dissonance in your own base, and people don't know what to do. To your point about the president's message, some people say, can he be disciplined? On the campaign trail, he has been pretty much.
These are bad people. We can't let this happen to our country. Republicans believe in the rule of law, not the rule of the mob. Democrats have signed up for a socialist takeover of American health care that would utterly destroy Medicare.
Utterly destroy Medicare. Now we have a policy debate about that. Some Democrats are for Medicare for all, but forget the policy. That is politics. Older voters, we'll get to turnout a little bit later, most likely to vote. The president's trying to say, don't dare vote for the Democrats.
Right, and so there have been places where he's been disciplined like that, and as you know, the Republican Party writ large may welcome some of that. But where he hasn't been particularly smart is in being able to offer a Trumpian way of touting things like the lower taxes that, you know, a lot of the Republicans out there, especially in some of these House races, but in the Senate races as well, would love to essentially have presidential support and a bully pulpit behind some of the things that they want to talk about, even if he wants to do it in a way that's Trumpian, in a way that talks all about himself, which would be easy to do, and you hardly ever get it. I think I saw one story about a rally that said he didn't get to the tax cuts until, you know, minute 61 in a, you know, 70 or 80-minute rally. That's not what some of the Republicans want, you know, despite the fact that some of the rhetoric in a rally like that is going to be helpful, but he's not closing it the way they'd like.
It's interesting because, you know, Republican leadership always talks about, you know, tax cuts and, you know, what things that they've done in Congress. But again, look at some of these ads that are running in these Republican districts. You're seeing them really lean into this, the president sort of calling the left this mob and these, you know, these socialists, really trying to paint them as extremists. I've seen a number of ads attacking Democratic candidates who have served in the military as being unpatriotic, so trying to link them to terrorists, which I think, you know, is laughable to a lot of people, but it shows you that they feel like perhaps that is not enough, and they are really sort of leaning into this narrative that the president is pretty good at right now.
You see those ads when the climate is so against you, then you go to slash and burn.
Right.
You go to things that simply cannot be supported by the facts often, but you do it hoping you can tear down the other guy.
Yeah, but President Trump's victory in 2016 was marginal, right? He actually lost the popular vote, but wins marginally in these states he has to win the Electoral College. This seems to be, I agree with you, Abby, I talked to a couple of Republican strategists the last few days. None of that reticence or concern about the Trumpian way is there anymore, because they seem to have internalized the idea that it's marginal victory. I mean, a victory that you win by just a few votes, by just grinding it out, by just trying to get your voters out there and motivated, is still a victory. I think the Kavanaugh confirmation hearing, I don't know if there's actually going to end up being a true Kavanaugh bump for Republicans, because, you know, we talked about the ways in which it also motivated Democrats as well. But it is one of those things, if Republicans do better, if they hold Democrats back a little bit in the House, if they really run the table on the Senate races, it's going to be because they really pushed on the margins and were able to just eke it out.
Right, you win the red states anyway. Don't lose red states in this environment. Try to at least hold yours.
Arizona's a perfect example of that,
Arizona,
where they're really grinding it out. And
Tennessee's another one. It's a key test there. We'll watch this play out. 23 days up. Next for us, though, to foreign policy. An American pastor welcomed home, but a bigger global storm is brewing. Saudi Arabia is accused of a horrific kidnapping and murder. And Congress is asking why the president seems so reluctant to get tough. This was an Oval Office celebration Saturday. Pastor Andrew Brunson free after spending 2 years in Turkish custody.
This has been a long journey, but for Andrew, it's been a very interesting day because, as you probably heard, I said a little bit earlier, from a Turkish prison to the White House in 24 hours. That's not bad.
Certainly an encouraging development, but as tensions with Turkey ease, a crisis with Saudi Arabia is challenging President Trump's cozy relationship with the royal family and his reluctance to make human rights a priority. This in the Washington Post about what happened to journalist Jamal Khashoggi after he entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. The voice recording from inside the embassy lays out what happened to Jamal after he entered, said one person with knowledge of the recording. You can hear how he was interrogated, tortured, and then murdered. The Saudi denials go as high as Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, but U.S. officials and key members of Congress say the intelligence they have reviewed leaves no doubt. The president has repeatedly made clear in recent days he is in no mood to cut off arms sales as part of any punishment, but as pressure from Congress mounts, his language is starting to get tougher.
There's a lot at stake, and maybe especially so because this man was a reporter. There's something, you'll be surprised to hear me say that, there's something really terrible and disgusting about that if that were the case. So we're going to have to see. We're going to get to the bottom of it, and there will be severe punishment.
Severe punishment is an escalation, if that's the right word, of the president's rhetoric. If you watched him throughout the week, at first he was kind of like, this didn't happen in the United States. Why should I care about it? He's not a citizen. Oh, he's a permanent resident. Well, the president, no way I'm cutting off arms sales. But he's being pushed by Congress just like he was on the Russia sanctions months ago. Is he moving?
I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the dissonance still there next week. Look, President Trump is not, this is not the first time that he would say something in one setting and say something in another setting. Every time that he's been asked about this week, he has been very, very clear. He is resistant to revisit this issue of the arms deal. He is convinced himself that Saudi Arabia is an important financial boon to the United States. That's not actually particularly true, but that's what the president believes, and I think that's a big deal for him. He does not want to have to explain somehow that that what he claims to be $110 billion in investments are not coming to the United States. That being said,
the actual spending is 10-15%.
Far less than that. Right. Far less than that. And as many analysts have pointed out, that's our leverage over them, not the other way around. So President Trump is grappling with this. We're seeing him grapple with it in real life. I think they are looking for, in the White House, a way to punish the Saudis that doesn't step on that issue for the president. But I think that this is still something that they are actively trying to work out, and we are not seeing them move quickly on it. That's notable. They are not moving with any kind of haste.
Right, and the president says he will speak to the Saudi king sometime this weekend. He has not as yet. The Crown Prince has directly denied it. The king's son has directly denied it to Jared Kushner, the president's aide. They have not even ruled out the Treasury Secretary still going to what they call Davos in the desert, a big Saudi investment conference. The Brits seem to indicate they're not going to go now. A lot of technology companies have pulled out. Secretary of State Pompeo saying we'll see if Secretary Mnuchin goes to that. My question is, just like on Russia, does this from Congress push the White House?
My instincts say that there's no question the Saudi government did this. It will hugely undermine that relationship, at least with Congress.
I've never been more disturbed than I am right now. If this did in fact happen, if this man was murdered in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, that would cross every line of normality in the international community. If it did happen, it would be hell to pay.
I think this reflects, I mean, the dissonance that Abby was talking about, what we just saw, reflects how much of an island Trump is on with respect to members of his own party, certainly members of his own party on Capitol Hill, even people within his own administration, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, these are not people who share his sort of transactional view, the president's transactional view of foreign relations, where all of this sort of esoteric stuff about human rights or moral leadership in the region. That doesn't really break through to the president's own view. So that's why there's still this idea that he very well may do something and may be pushed. I don't know if he holds a particular view on this very strongly, which is why ultimately I think he is going to be pushed. But it's an odd position to be in for a president, the guy at the very top, to be so at odds with sort of everybody else.
If he does end up going, tough on the Saudis and taking some sort of action, you have to probably look at those top allies on the Hill. We just saw a clip of Lindsey Graham, who was one of the top advocates for Brett Kavanaugh and helped him get through, defended him, through the entire fight. Rand Paul is co-sponsoring a resolution that is likely to get a vote in the Senate at some point that basically says that this arms deal shouldn't go through. And there was already a lot of resistance to this arms deal on a bipartisan basis in the Senate. This was before we even heard about the murder of this reporter. And so that's only going to increase the amount of angst about that deal. And he's going to continue to get pressure, including from key allies like Rand Paul.
And so people who ask why doesn't the president get there right out of the box? I'm going to at least freeze these arms sales. We're going to be tough. I'm going to call the king on day one. People who ask why, Trump critics point to his first international trip. Remember, the Saudis threw him the big party. There was the infamous orb. There was a great celebration. The president was feted as a world hero. There are others, and we go back right here. This is the first trip from the president right here. Some people say, well, they love him, and this is what he loves most of all, and he doesn't turn on people who do this to him. And there are other people now saying, well, what about the Kushner companies? And what about the Trump organization? Listen to the president himself from day one of the campaign about his business relationships.
Saudi Arabia, they make $1 billion a day. $1 billion a day. I love the Saudis. Many are in this building. Saudi Arabia, and I get along great with all of them. They buy apartments from me. They spend $40 million, $50 million. Am I supposed to dislike them? I like them very much.
One would think, given that the president would want to prove, especially when you listen to the details, the allegations here about the Saudi team flying into Istanbul, a murder, dismembering the body, smuggling it out. You would think, given the questions people are going to ask about the financial interest, that the president would bang from day one.
Yeah, but that's the opposite of every instinct that we've ever seen with this president, right? You could say that about Russia as well. You would think that given the series of things that have happened over the last 2 years, that the president would bend over backwards to be tough on Russia to prove that he wasn't complicit or colluded with them. So that's not the kind of president that we have. And in addition to the sort of behavioral things that you just talked about, Saudi Arabia from day one was a linchpin in his foreign policy vis-a-vis Iran and the Iran deal, in which the Saudis very much supported the United States withdrawing from. And so you've got his personal, proclivities on these kinds of things. You've got his foreign policy, and so if he changes, if he does switch, if this kind of outrageous thing that may have happened switches his position on this, it will be because he's pushed, not because he wants to do it.
Well, we'll watch it play out. The Saudi government today threatening sanctions against anyone who retaliates against them. Having some history with the Saudis over the years, so they say things. They don't usually do things. Up next, most of you don't have to wait, but this being a midterm year, history says most of you won't bother to vote, early or on Election Day. You might not have to wait 23 days to cast your vote. 37 states and the District of Columbia allow early voting. That process already underway in 15 states. So most of us don't have a good excuse not to vote. Though turnout numbers in midterm elections are pretty bleak, especially among the groups Democrats need to show up if there is to be a blue wave. Let's just first look at the history. Midterm turnout from 1942, that was your high in 1966. This is the last midterm election. That's pathetic, frankly. 36%, a post-war low. You look at the eligible electorate, and then look what happens in a midterm year. Voters over 65%, over 65, if everyone showed up, would be only 20% of the electorate. Young people could make up 29% of the electorate if they all showed up. Look what happened in 2014. Older people, much more sway. They show up to vote. Younger people, about half of the influence they could have in the election because they don't tend to show up. That is the problem in a midterm election year. So who has high interest in this one? Seniors do. They show up. White voters. Democrats need African Americans, Latinos, and young voters to turn out. Less enthusiasm, less high interest among those groups. Can they turn them out in the end? Well, Democratic groups, especially looking at younger voters, running ads, doing anything they can, say, please show up.
Sure you don't like it. So, you'll like some meme on Instagram.
If the weather is nice, maybe you could go to one of the little marches.
You might even share this video on Facebook.
But you won't vote.
You young people never do.
But I do. I do.
I do.
Midterms, primaries.
Every single election. We'll be there, but you won't.
It's a mocking ad, essentially challenging young people to get out and vote. Taylor Swift on Instagram this past week weighing in on the Tennessee Senate race. The former Governor Phil Bredesen, she said that's her candidate again. Has a ton of followers, trying to tell young people everywhere, not just in Tennessee, get out and vote. The Texas long shot, Beto O'Rourke, trying to beat Ted Cruz in Texas, needs younger voters to come out. Came out on a rally on a skateboard last night. We might have some video of that as well. Let's see, play that out. There you go. This is the challenge. The big numbers favor the Democrats overwhelmingly. To turn this from a blue ripple or a small blue wave into a blue tsunami, they need to motivate people who traditionally do not show up in midterm elections. Can they?
They're certainly putting money trying to do so. The DCCC, which basically is the House campaign arm, has spent $25 million specifically trying to target unlikely voters, minorities, young people. And they know that they have an issue here and they want people to show up. Beyond young people, though, a big concern that they have is Latino voters right now. There are about a dozen House Republican districts where the population of Latinos is above 20%, up to 2/3 of the population. And this is halfway to the numbers they need to the majority. So if they get all 12 of those, they're halfway to the 23 seats they need. But they are having trouble right now getting people, and they're trying to do that with Spanish-speaking ads. They have Latino field directors, but they know they're struggling right now, and they've got a couple more weeks to turn that around.
And this is the issue that Hillary Clinton had in 2016. Latino voters, African-American voters, getting them to turn out, but also particularly with Latino voters, they found that the sort of Trump is sort of anti-Mexican or whatever, the build the wall, anti-build the wall rhetoric was not enough to get those voters out. So I think Democrats are going to have to build a pretty robust message for Latino voters centered on the economy, on education, on health care in order to counter. It's not going to be enough to sort of project Trump as the sort of anti-immigration person.
And there are so many places where Latino voters, Nevada, Texas, many House districts, as you noted, younger voters just about everywhere, especially. You can win one district here, but if you want to win 3, you need your whole base to turn out.
That's right. And in some places like Texas, they actually, Hispanic voters, for instance, are more likely than in other states to vote Republican. Ted Cruz is doing relatively well to other Republicans among those voters. I mean, this just goes back to me. If we're talking about this now in mid-October about turning out voters who ought to have been motivated from day one. That seems to be a simmering problem that nobody on the Democratic side wants to publicly talk about, but it seems like a big problem.
It's a problem for the party if they can't turn them out. We will see. That's one question of the poll. As the ABC Washington Post poll today shows a little better enthusiasm. We'll see. That's what the last 3 weeks are about. Up next, our reporters share a page from their notebooks, including President Trump's visits this week to storm-ravaged Florida and Georgia. Head one last time around the Inside Politics table. Ask our great reporters to share a little something from their notebooks, help get you out ahead of the political news just around the corner. Abby?
Well, less than a month before the midterm elections, of course, the storm that we had last week became something of a wild card. Storms are often things that you can't really predict, obviously, but right now, at this moment, I think the White House is trying to make sure that they don't become a sort of negative factor here for some of those key races in Florida and in Georgia. Now, President Trump heading to both states this upcoming week, and the federal response is going to be pretty important. The Panhandle really devastated, and that's actually also where a lot of Trump supporters supporters also live. Now, the two races in Florida, the governor's race and the Senate race, are two critical races that Republicans are trying to hold on to. But the flip side to that coin is that Tallahassee's mayor, Democrat Andrew Gillum, is the Democratic candidate for governor. So again, we don't know where this is all going to go, but I can tell you that the White House is making sure that when they respond to this storm, that they are forward-looking on the situation so they don't become a negative factor in important races down in those states.
Another wild card in those very close races, governor and Senate. Mike?
So for the next 60 days or so, the government is taking comment on a proposal by the White House that would expand the extent to which they can deny immigrants the right to get a green card based on their taking of public services like Section 8 housing vouchers or food stamps. Now, this is not only a kind of policy approach, but it's also political, because what they're trying to do is to put Democrats in the position of defending not only immigrants, but also defending people who take public benefits. Those are two issues that Republicans think that their candidates will be helped by. Democrats are put in a kind of awkward position because they want to come to the defense of immigrants and people who take public benefits and oppose this rule, but by doing so, they fear that that makes their possibility of re-election a little bit harder. So look for them to expand their defense and their opposition to the rule after the elections, not before.
Immigration, always a constant political issue in this administration. Michael?
Well, in case we didn't get enough of our fill of Supreme Court politics, the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings have obviously made that issue an important issue in the midterm elections. And there's, I think, a real question about whether or not there will ever be in the next several years a nominee of a president to get confirmed by a Senate held by the opposite party. And this is, I think, a hypothetical but a potent question. I was in Tennessee a few days ago. I asked Democrat Phil Bredesen, a moderate trying to win in a red state, where he said he would have supported Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation. I asked if the Democrats were to take over control of the Senate, Chuck Schumer were to deny, say, President Trump a SCOTUS nominee vote on the floor, what would he do about it? He didn't have an answer for that, but he did say he believed that all Supreme Court nominees who go through the process should get a vote on the floor. I don't know if his base or really the base of the Republican Party would be okay with that. We're sort of in a new era here, but I think it's an interesting question to start hacking and probing these Senate candidates and on down the line.
Yeah, what they think in Tennessee, probably not what Chuck Schumer thinks.
No.
Rachel?
The focus is going to be obviously the midterms for the next few weeks, but just as the polls are closing on November 6th, the new narrative is going to be about leadership jockeying in the House, especially if it changes control. We are seeing Kevin McCarthy, who is Paul Ryan's #2, really try to lock down conservatives. This is a group that blocked him from becoming speaker to lead the conference before. He is out there introducing bills that would fund the president's wall, $25 billion worth of wall money, basically resolutions that would block illegal immigrants from voting, which clearly is not a big problem. But what he's doing right now is trying to woo the far right. And it sounds like he actually is having a little bit of success. We've seen Breitbart, of all publications, that has always been a pain in the side of Paul Ryan's, McCarthy himself. They are actually sort of opening the door to him. And we're hearing that's because the president himself wants McCarthy to lead the conference, and he's leaning on these conservatives and saying, give him a chance. I want him to lead.
Starburst for everybody.
Yes.
Look it up on the internet if you didn't get that one. I'll close with this. The president has settled on a new White House counsel, and the choice is proof the White House knows it faces a challenging and potentially treacherous stretch on the legal front once the election passes. Veteran D.C. litigator Pat Cipollone is the president's choice. Trump lawyer Emmett Flood was the early favorite, but it was decided by the president and others he should stay focused on his work responding to the special counsel investigation. Now, once the election passes and Justice Department guidelines pass, the White House expects new twists from the Mueller probe and in separate cases being handled by federal prosecutors in New York, looking into, among other things, the president's business. Plus, if Democrats take the House, January will bring a flood of new document requests and oversight investigation. So Flood stays put, and Cipollone comes on board with an urgent goal, not only of getting himself in place, but of quickly hiring a handful of deputies for a now quite depleted counsel's office. That's it for us. I hope you can join us on weekdays as well. Thanks for sharing your Sunday morning. We're also here at noon on weekdays. Remember that. Up next, State of the Union with Jake Tapper. His guests include Senators Marco Rubio and Bernie Sanders, plus the Georgia Democratic gubernatorial nominee, Stacey Abrams. Have a great Sunday.